of the Collaborative Governance Project, an initiative of the Internet Society, and former Assistant Secretary of the National Telecommunication and Information Administration. Larry?
Thanks, Mark. It's working? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, somebody said we were going to put you to work later. We're going to put you to work right now. So they've given me an hour to turn this group of folks from all over Canada into a lean, mean consensus building machine. So we're going to get going on it right away. So first off, how many people know what a multi-stakeholder process is? Is that a term that's confusing or mysterious to anybody? Andrew? Anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about when we talk about a multi-stakeholder process? Huh? Well, I'm not going to tell you, but we'll ask somebody else. Who can tell him what a multi-stakeholder process is? And we're going to need the other mic here going, and a mic runner. Somebody? Martin Botterman, okay. Martin's a veteran of many multi-stakeholder processes. So tell him what it is.
Well, it's funny. In Holland, we call it polder. And polder is, the polder landscape is what we do because 2/3 of the Netherlands was already below sea level some time ago. And it's a joint interest of everybody in the polder, from baker to mayor to farmer, to keep the water out. And that is basically the core of multi-stakeholderism for me. It's recognition that you cannot do it alone and that you need to work with other partners to make it happen. And it all starts there.
Yep, okay, that sounds pretty good. Anybody want to add to that? Anybody have a different take on it? Okay, how many people have, oh, Alan.
Well, I'll just point out what, in particular for some of the government folks in the room, that often when there's a problem in society or the economy, people look to the government to solve that. But just to build on what Martin said, this is a process in which government is seen to be necessary as one of the stakeholders in the process, but it's not led by government. So in fact, it's a partnership typically between government, technical experts, and also often civil society, depending on what the issues are, so, in which no one particular group leads necessarily, but there is a form of leadership that comes out of that forming stage, which I suspect that's the point we're at now, is it not, Larry?
We could be. All right. How many people have actually participated in a multi-stakeholder discussion such as what Martin and Alan described? If you've done it before, raise your hand. How many people have never done it before? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have a few. Now, those of you who have been in multi-stakeholder discussions, how many of you would say you were in successful multi-stakeholder discussions in that you actually reached consensus at the end? Okay, how many have been in multi-stakeholder discussions that did not reach consensus? Okay. Olaf, why has that happened? What is do you think the biggest barrier to reaching consensus in your experience?
Shared expectations. If expectations are not shared and there is no shared goal, often people find not arriving at that shared goal. Mm-hmm. And then you find out at the end of the process, not at the beginning.
Right.
And often that is one of the things that goes wrong.
Right, that's very important, and I hope if nothing else happens today, everybody leaves today with a clear understanding of why you're here and what's expected of this group. So that's very, very important to this. Andrew, what else have you encountered in terms of barriers to reaching consensus?
Well, you can sometimes get bad faith, right? So you get people who want to manipulate the process in such a way they get the definition so that they can set up the conclusion that they want and so on. And you can't do that. You got to work within the idea that everybody's here to solve the problem. If you don't, it's just going to be a failure.
Okay. Well, let's deal with that one right now. Is anybody here in bad faith? If you are, please leave. I'm sorry, you are? She raised her hand. I was just checking in to see what's going on. Okay. Anybody else have a different take on why it's hard to reach consensus? Of course, nobody's asked the question, what is consensus? But we'll get to that in a minute. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I don't know everybody's name yet. Wait for the mic.
Trust and time for people to get to know each other so that you can actually get on the same page.
Yep. Okay. Martin?
A crucial element is the willingness to reach a greater goal together. Because if you focus on your own nearby goal, there may not be a shared interest. So you need to be able to step over that.
Right. So we've heard some really key concepts here that I want everybody to kind of embed in your brain for the purposes of the discussions today and continuing on. This one of trust and the idea of working for the common good. That very much has to be part of the approach that everybody has here. And so one of the ways that we do this is making sure that we give everybody a chance to contribute and that we listen to everybody. And so we're going to do a quick exercise on that right now with everybody just at each of the tables. So here's what I want you to do. One of the things you have when you're trying to collect input from people and you're brainstorming with people is you run into this notion, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, in terms of how people process information and how people are able to present their ideas. It's defined as extrovert, introvert in the Myers-Briggs approach, if people are familiar with that lingo. But it's just the idea that some people are very quick to think of ideas and express them very, very quickly. Other people, they take a little bit longer. They need to think about it. And oftentimes we find that the people who take that extra time to think about things and are a little more contemplative, a little more introverted about it, actually come up with the best ideas. But if you don't engage in a process that elicits input from everybody in a way that allows all these different styles to be able to work to success, you could end up missing out on some really important ideas. So we're going to do a really simple exercise which is going to guide this group going forward, which is what we want to do here in the next 20 minutes, is develop the ground rules for engagement for this group. Another way to think about it is the courtesies that we will show each other as we work through these issues. So I'm going to, many of you have probably done this, but there's a thing called the nominal group process. Does anybody know what that is? Does that mean anything to anybody? It's really simple. What it means is that when you want to discuss an idea, you don't just throw it out on the table and say, now discuss among yourselves. You actually give people some time to think about it. So here's what I want you to do. I want each of you to take a piece of paper, and you're going to spend 3 minutes just jotting down what you think are the kinds of rules or courtesies that will govern how you will act with each other in this room that you would like to see adopted by the group as a whole. But this is to give everybody a chance to get their thoughts down so that we don't miss any really good ideas. So is everybody clear on what I'm asking in terms of what a courtesy is or what a ground rule is, an expectation? It really is just how you will govern yourselves in terms of what happens in this room. Is that clear? Is anybody not clear on that? Okay, 3 minutes starting now. Okay, less than a minute. Actually, I see a lot of heads up. Is everybody done? We don't have to use the full 3 minutes. We always can be more efficient. Anybody still thinking? All right. So I'm just going to go table by table. In a group this big, it would be ideal to have you all work as tables, and you're going to get the chance to do that later today. But for purposes of this exercise, we'll just do this as the committee of the whole. So someone over here, give me a suggestion for a courtesy or a ground rule you think everybody ought to follow. Anybody? Zoe.
There's a truism about relationships, which is to say that you're not.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need the mic for you.
There's a truism about relationships, which is to say when you're arguing with someone, you're responding to their ideas, not attacking the person personally. And I think, I'm sure everyone here is lovely and civil, but just to say, make sure you're responding more to the idea as opposed to a person.
Excellent first courtesy. Does everybody agree with that one? Is there any dissent? Anybody object to that one? So here's what I captured from Zoe. Treat everyone with respect, discuss the issues, no personal attacks. Does that capture it, Zoe? Okay. This table. Adrian.
Thanks, Larry. Recognize the value of all inputs and take the time to reflect on the inputs of others.
Okay, explain what you mean a little bit more.
Excuse me. I think that recognizing the value is probably pretty straightforward, but it's easy to hear it and move on and not really take the time to process. So I think we would benefit from being able to really think through some of these ideas. Particularly since at times something that may not seem super relevant at that moment will turn out to be relevant later in the discussion.
Okay, so what I captured here is think through, respond to all ideas. Any disagreement? If you don't agree with these, raise your hand and tell me, oh, that's a stupid one. This is a good one, but but I want to encourage people to. All right, so we're all going to commit to this one. Is that everybody okay with that? Okay, this table. Do I have a volunteer before I call on somebody? I'm sorry, I can't see your name tag. Oh, there we go, Fod.
So I think similar to that one, I had open to new ideas and approaches. I said nothing is off the table as an option.
Okay. Let me just amplify I think that ties in with this one. All ideas on the table. Okay, how about something different? This table. We've already heard from, no, wait, Tracy, you've already spoken. I want somebody else. Here, you've turned your name tag so I can't see your name. Okay, that ensures you get called on. Kirsten.
Okay.
Also, avoiding eye contact. That's
Exactly. I would say that if the conversation seems to sort of stray, that we should ensure that we continue to go back to the original priorities and goals of the objectives.
Stay on topic, is that what I'm hearing? Anybody have an issue with that? Remember, you guys, when I write it up here, you're now going to commit to all these. And I know you're going to break that one. It shouldn't be. But I think we'll talk about how these get enforced at the end of this. Because part of it will depend on people in this room raising their hand and say, oh, number 3, meaning somebody's drifting off topic. But you can stay on topic and still be presenting ideas that are pertinent to what you're talking about. So I think this group is smart enough. They'll figure out a way to do that.
Would it help to say tie to topic?
Adrian, say that again?
Would it help to say tie
Okay, so you want to modify your number 2 to put that relevancy standard on it? That's what I've heard you say. So I went back and changed that, your number 2, to say we're going to be, think through, respond to all ideas relevant to topic.
No, actually, I would take that out. I would take relevant to topic out.
Okay, what did you want then added?
I was just thinking below on staying on topic, that one way you do that is to link your ideas to the topic. But actually, take it all out. I mean, ignore it. Extraneous.
Okay, all right, going to keep going here. Back here, volunteer, win.
Raving extrovert. So I stole mercilessly from Stephen Covey. So I have 3, but I'll just zero it to 1. For the introverts in the room, be proactive, make contacts. It's really hard to do for the introverts in the room because we want to hear what you have to say. Don't get bulldozed by guys like me.
I heard 2 things there. I heard be proactive, which is kind of an admonition to everybody, but then you specifically wanted to single out introverts too, and for.
I had 1 for extroverts and 1 for introverts. The extroverts, oh sorry. To the extroverts, seek first to understand and use your active listening skills today.
All right, I'm going to add that one, use active listening skills. Does everybody know what that means? Okay, that means like put your phones away, listen to what's going on. Okay. Okay. Let's see, this table. We've heard from Martin, we've heard from Alan. How about Peter?
I mean, I think they've largely all been touched on at this point. But again, you know, touching on the introvert part, it's like, how can you tell? But yeah, it's make sure all participants really have an opportunity to be heard and express their views.
Okay. All right, so what I captured here was make sure everyone has a chance to, and I kind of added to yours, to form and express their views. Because as we talked before, there's also, you've got to give people time to actually think. So it's not just making sure everybody expresses their views, you need to give time to think. So let's take that page and put it up on the wall. So before we do this, last call, everybody on board with these 6 ground rules? Everybody's committing to live by these when they're in this room working with each other? All right. Oh, Martin, are you objecting? Oh, you're yay, okay. Oh, you want an affirmative, okay.
No, excellent. I
not
like
done,
it.
but
It's
I
good
just-
to get us up to speed. With all the courtesies, it's good to also say, dare to challenge. That's also an important part. I think that's the only one sort of missing. But I'm very much on board with this.
All right, I've still got a couple more tables to capture back here. Okay, do I have a volunteer from this table? Oh, she's avoiding eye contact.
Oh, no, I'm not. So, Michael Luken from IEEE Canada. I think we should also limit talking time so that not somebody decides to talk about something for 10 minutes. And unless question back and forth like you did before.
So be concise. Be concise and clear. Any objections to that? Okay. I don't know how well you all know each other in this room, but who's going to be the first one to break that rule, I guess, is the... I have some candidates, but... Okay. Got a couple more tables. All right, this table. Volunteer?
My idea has already been taken. My
All right, we don't have, anybody have an idea that we don't have on the board? Here we go, Mark.
Instead of saying no or but, always continue on the sentence with yes and. So keep the conversation positive because we want to get all the ideas on the table and not have a conflict.
Okay, so that's kind of like, is that the same as the one we had, which was all ideas on the table? I don't think so. I think you're saying something different. So you're saying don't say no, say yes if or yes and? Yeah, so one idea is that if you're hearing something you don't like, you can say, well, I could accept this if it was changed to encounter that, as opposed to just, hey, that's not acceptable. I think, does that capture your point? Okay. Okay, back here. All right, everybody's making eye contact. I can't use that one. Who wants to? Kristen.
Sometimes when we get excited about an idea, we don't let others finish their thought. So do not interrupt me, please.
Right. That's an important one. Now, with the microphones, if that's the way that we progress, it'll be easier. But when you're in your little group discussions, that's a huge issue. People interrupting each other. Okay. Everybody agree to these? These are going to be the rules of engagement so far? Okay, what have we missed? I mean, I just took one suggestion from each table, but if in your notes, did you write something down that we don't have captured up here? Tracy, wait for the mic coming behind you. No, right up here.
Thank you. Along with all the multiple point of views, we should be declaring conflicts of interest. So at least we should know who's at the table with whom we're talking with when we're putting ideas on the table.
Okay, so you don't have any problem with everybody expressing their views. You just want to know where they may come from or how they might have been influenced. Okay. Mark, you may want to think about an actual process to deal with that. Yes, sir.
Just one additional point. In a multi-stakeholder environment, typically the size of each group does not have to be equal. So we need to ensure that each group is represented, their views are heard, even if their size in number is small, but their views are quite as important as a group that has larger number of presentation. We can think about government versus civil society versus technical community. So each group has something to say and it needs to be heard. Thank you.
So what I wrote down here is it's the views that matter, not the numbers. Right, that's very important. Yes, sir.
Actually, had a less of a suggestion, more of a question. Are we operating under Chatham House rules, like in a non-attribution context, especially if we're? Oh, is that already up there? Oh, there's a camera.
No. Yeah, I was going to say this is.
There we go.
Yeah. So the idea of this is that at the end of this, we want to have a consensus outcome. So, in the spirit of openness and transparency, anybody can watch this. I don't know what Mark's plans are and Pamela's plans are for archiving this, but I think you should assume that what you're saying is to help the group reach consensus. And in that sense, the more open it is, the better.
So is the idea to come to consensus on positions today, or is it divided into an exploratory? So if we have exploratory components to the discussion, that may allow for more of a less constrained discussion.
Right. Well, you're not, the only thing I'm here to get you to reach consensus on are these lists of rules. What you get done this afternoon will be up to you and how fast the group can proceed. But yeah, you're making a very good point that in any good or in most multi-stakeholder discussions, there's usually a period of exploration. It's called joint fact-finding, and there will be some of that because you'll have some speakers here later this morning to help set the stage with some of the issues, and then the idea is to get folks starting to talk about those issues over lunch. So you will not reach conclusion on recommendations or things like that today. This will be a an iterative process over a number of sessions.
I guess if there's a formal recognition that individuals are not taking formal positions when speaking on behalf of organizations, it might be helpful. Sorry, if we recognize that individuals are not necessarily taking formal positions on behalf of organizations when expressing positions, it might be helpful to create a less restricted dialogue.
Okay. Katie and then Olaf.
Glenn McKnight from the live stream would like to recommend using the nominal group process.
So I think that's, I'm just going to add that under item 6 with the one that says make sure everyone has a chance to form and express views. I think it's related. Okay. Anything else? Olaf, that's right.
I think it's an appropriate last one. Respect the sticks in the ground. So
I'm
once
sorry, say that again?
Respect the sticks in the ground.
Once
Once
you'll
you
need to
made a
explain that.
decision and you move on, you gauged consensus, then do not return to that and do not start to address that once again, unless, you know, a critical fact has been disclosed. But I think
So you're saying once a decision is reached,
Yep.
stick with it?
Yep.
Does everybody agree with that one? I mean, it'll be, yeah, Martin, it'll be, but understand that my guess is this group's not always going to have the same people at every meeting. And you do have to account for the fact that you may have somebody come to the next meeting who wasn't at this one. And one of the things that's always useful, and I think the idea will be that these will get typed up and circulated to everybody, and then I would recommend these be posted at every session so that if to the extent you have somebody new, somebody can point to these and say, rule number 8, we all agreed to it so that you stick to this.
And so in that context, if somebody new comes on board and makes an argument that has already been made when you reached a certain decision, that's just off the table.
Okay, but it'll be up to all of you in the room to enforce that. Okay, any others, or do we have 12? That's kind of a nice number, but we could go for the baker's dozen, 13, if anybody has another suggestion. Jacques.
Raise your hand when you want to talk.
That's somewhat related to the don't interrupt other people too. So, so one thing that nobody mentioned, which I've seen really destroy a lot of attempts to do joint sessions or joint discussions like this, is the issue of sidebars and people talking amongst themselves when someone else is talking. And I think it's covered in some of these things. It's like, you know, respecting people, use active listening ability. But should we be more specific about the idea that if you want to talk to somebody, you go out of the room and talk so that you're not interrupting and interfering with other people? Any reaction to that one? Everybody okay? I'm just going to add it under active listening skills. I'll say side conversations are go out of the room. Okay, Andrew.
Thanks. I want to press a little bit on rule number 12 here because I agree with it in that I think once you've got consensus, you should respect that consensus and you should understand it. But, you know, Keynes said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do? And if somebody comes along and comes up with a new argument, presents some new information or something, you have to take that into account because, right, that's one of the deals that you're making when you join one of these kinds of processes, is accepting that, well, maybe somebody didn't think of it earlier and now they do. That returns to that, you know, sort of good faith point that I was making earlier, because if somebody, you know, holds it in abeyance on purpose, that's a different thing. And I can't make a rule for that, but I know it when I see it.
So I took your language. We'll see if Olaf will agree to this. How about if I add the words, unless there's new information? In other words, you stick with it unless somebody's bring something new to the table. Could you accept that amendment?
Oh, absolutely. I think that was what I was trying to express. If an existing argument comes to the table, then, you know, it doesn't change the consensus. But that does mean if a new argument comes to the table, yeah, let's learn from it.
All right, good. All right, so we now have this page of courtesies and ground rules. Is everybody on board with each of these? Everybody affirmatively agreeing? I see all the heads nodding. By the way, we never vote in multi-stakeholder discussions. I want to make that clear. We're going to get to that in a second, but we just take the sense of the room and see if everybody can live with this. So it's up to people to raise objections if they have them, but we don't take votes. It's not like this passed 60-40. This passed as a consensus decision of the room. Everybody okay with this? Okay, so let's talk about consensus. There you go. Okay, what do we mean when we talk about consensus? Anybody have a definition? Do we mean everybody, 100%? Full unanimity? Does anybody think that's a workable definition? Yes or no? That's a simple yes or no question. Does anybody think we should operate under a rule of unanimity, that nothing goes forward unless everybody affirmatively expresses support? All right, I don't hear anybody nodding their head that that's what they want. I see a few heads nodding no. Okay, so what are we going to use as the standard otherwise? How are we going to know when we reach consensus? I'm sorry? Hold on.
We've stopped arguing.
All right, he says it's consensus when we've stopped arguing. There's actually, that's pretty close to a good standard, although we might rephrase it a little bit. Other ideas? Adrian.
Just that we have no longer got strong disagreement, which is on any party.
Yeah, but that's pretty similar to the way he expressed it. Any other formulations? This is important because you people are going to come up to this at some point where you're going to look around yourselves and say, have we reached consensus or not? So we ought to try to get this clear. Martin?
Well, it's important that we know everything has been said, that we've heard it, that we all understand it. Otherwise, you can have consensus. Doesn't mean you all need to agree it's the best solution, but at least that we know that we've heard each other.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, you. So we would have at that point a number of organizations or people who are pro. We would have those who can live with it, and none or very, very few who cannot live with it.
Okay.
And so I think the big question is, can we accept that there will be people who say, I cannot live with it, or can we not accept that part?
So that's actually about as good a formulation as I've ever had for how do you define consensus, which is, can you live with it? And it's basically good facilitators when they're trying to reach consensus in a room. That's what they always ask people is, can you live with it? So you don't have to get people to affirmatively raise their hand or affirmatively nod that they're in support of something, but it really does come down, can you live with it? But there's a big caveat, and it comes back to Martin's point, which is that to the extent somebody can't live with it, have you had a full discussion of why they can't. And so that at least the room has considered the objections people may have raised and has determined whether or not anything can be done about it. So Martin, how did you phrase it again in terms of considering those views? I want to capture that on the board, what you just said a minute ago.
Thank you. Understand what we talk about, basically. So even if you don't agree, at least we know we agree on what we talked about. Clarity. So that we understand what it is, basically. Can you live with it?
Okay, so we'll capture this idea of has the group considered and discussed all dissenting views as an attempt to try to work things out. Now, if you're a dissenter, there's an obligation on you too, which is that it's not enough just to say, that doesn't work for me. If you're a dissenter, your role needs to be, how do you put forward an alternative that addresses the concerns of the larger group? And so that becomes an important part of the discussion too. It's not, you just can't have the person who comes in and says, you know, this is my position and it's not going to change and everybody has to come to my view of the world. If they're not willing to put forward an alternative that addresses all of the other concerns that are being raised, then that's really an invalid way to proceed in these discussions. So is that an issue everybody can agree with, that point? So, are people comfortable with this as an approach to when you will have reached consensus? Is there any, as you think through what might come up, those of you who have been through these before and have run into barriers, is there anything here that you would say we're missing an issue or something needs to be added? And is everybody comfortable with what we have here? Anybody want to be heard on this? Tracy, here, I'll give you the mic.
The only last thing I could think of is just because we've reached consensus, it doesn't mean it's final. So it means that it can still go out for consultation and then revision. So there's consensus in the room, but it doesn't mean that that's the absolute best source of all knowledge. Perhaps things have to go out a little bit, roam in specialist circles, and then we get feedback.
No, I think that's a very good point, because there are more people interested in this issue than are in this room. And I'm sure many of you are here in a representative capacity to begin with. So the question of going back and getting input from, you know, your constituencies or your coworkers or whatever becomes an important part of this process and needs to be built into it. So I think that's all still part of the reaching of consensus, so that you can reach a contingent consensus subject to, you know, you going back to your organization and sharing and making and getting input from the people you work with. That's perfectly appropriate. And I think that ought to be part of, how many people are here and that is more of a representative that feel they would have to take anything back to somebody or to other people? Okay. Okay, but that's an important thing to keep in mind. All right, any other thoughts on this? So when you get into a fight, these rules basically are going to answer anything that'll come up. Everybody's nodding yes, or not everybody. I see some heads nodding yes. I don't see anybody nodding no. So you're comfortable with this? Going? Okay. All right, we've got this. So how do people feel? You feel like you're ready to get going and start solving all these great important problems? So, well, let's get started then. Mark, do I go back to you or do we go straight to Andrew?
Well, I guess we could go back to me to go straight to Andrew. I'd like to invite Andrew Sullivan up to the front to introduce our speakers, and Andrew will help us facilitate our session through the rest of the day. Thank you, Larry. That was very good. That was excellent. Well done.
Sorry about that. I'm Andrew Sullivan, and I'm sorry it took me a moment to get up here, but I was trying not to cough in the microphone. So